Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab, brought to you by CPA Practice Advisor, with your hosts, Randy Johnston and Brian Tankersley.
Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab. I'm with my co-host, Brian Tankersley, today. I'm Randy Johnston. We're going to talk about a product platform, Audit Sight. Now, we just had the pleasure of doing an audit automation overview with co-founder Jonathan Womack and his associate Michael Zimmerman. And we're looking at how the audit profession is changing. There's so many platform changes, there's so much guidance changes, and there's so many tool changes. This was one of the tools that we thought just deserved some time. Now, the tool makes auditors much more efficient, as it turns out, and they have a couple of specific offerings that they're doing well in. And one of the ones that they're able to help with is transaction advisory services. And when you think about audit practices, assurance practices today, there is so much focus around revenue and margin growth, really focusing around utilization, realization issues. And part of that is because where firms want to actually be acquired by private equity or merge, they need to have their practices more tuned up. Further, staff accountants and seniors managers are in such short supply. It's really motivated a lot of outsourcing. And there's concern that staff are actually working on the right things and are being effective and efficient. And with the quality standards kicking in, the way the audit methodologies have worked has also changed over this past couple of years. So, we look at the transition in the assurance areas, it's pretty substantive. Brian, I probably said some things wrong because you're the auditor among us. What would you comment on terms of the changes in the profession and what Audit Sight platform does?
Well, in addition to the technical changes we talked about, where we're moving again away from sampling and toward 100% testing, we also have the business model changes where, we're moving toward some of these different kinds of practices. You look at CLA and I believe it's CLA that incorporated a law firm in Arizona, and some of these non-traditional practice areas that are getting added. And it's quite an interesting time in the profession. We also look at the private equity roll-ups and how those are driving the desire for better information on quality of earnings, both out of the audits, the validation of the quality of earnings out of the audits, as well as the quality of earnings for the firms so that the PE firms can get their desired returns.
So, to that point, Brian, it is interesting to me because not only does this platform help with that, but I'm aware of at least another half dozen platforms that are doing that type of work as well. And it was also fascinating as I've dealt with larger firms in the past 2 years, top 100 and G400 class firms that have audit practices, how they've restructured the practices to isolate the assurance team, to also isolate the revenue overheads and so forth along the way, yet enabled CAS. But here's probably the key takeaway for our listeners. The larger firms have concluded that they need to have a advisory service offering in every category. So just like your citing of the law firm piece, another statement might be everyone has to have HR. And when I look at my auditors, with the independence requirements, the separation of the business units to try to maintain that is kind of an interesting deal.
Well, and part of the challenge is that historically the margins on audit have been lower than some of the margins for other services. And so it's really compounding. We've got a general problem with staffing in the profession anyway, and hanging on to those seniors, managers, partners anyway in audit, but it's particularly more acute in audit than it is the rest of the firm, just because, again, the future is so up in the air with so many different things.
Yeah, so we'd like to turn your attention to the audit automation overview podcasts in this area and turn our attention then to Audit Sight, because one of the things that they do is they improve the data intake, the data verification, and the results in automation. And, they can connect to accounting data, but many auditors know that clients are not connecting data directly. So this ability to process data either with a direct connection or through CSV or Excel sheets is a big deal. And that includes the accounting data, the banking data. And this tool, AuditSight, is designed to work over the top of all common platforms, on top of Caseware and Engagement Manager and CCH Engagement or Access Engagement and Inflow and Field Guide. And I can keep naming platforms. But regardless of what you're using for prep comp review or audit, this tool can sit on top of that, do the data intake, do the data verification accurately, and then produce documented work papers for reconciliations and cash proof and debt book and the like. So that's the goal of the tool. They do have a fairly accurate PDF bank statement conversion tool. And as we've said in prior podcasts with you, if an accountant is keying data, we have a broken process. And Audit Sight has built a tool that can do a bank statement conversion quite effectively. It basically allows the upload of the PDF, and then it does footing and roll statements and will identify any Photoshop data and any file tampering. So the time saved on this tends to be pretty substantial along the way. So, Brian, I think another thing that they have is the ability to get non-connected customers' data acquired.
Yeah, it was very interesting when we talked to the two executives from Audit Sight during our previous podcast. One of the learnings I had was that many clients now are not wanting to give up the API access for direct import of data, which blew my mind. Okay, but I mean, I get wanting to control and not understanding it and things like that, but it's, again, the thing here is that sometimes people use systems in a different way where they don't use the entire system. So maybe an export wouldn't do exactly what you need. So they have templates where you can copy and paste data to get it in there. There are also ERP guides that tell you exactly which reports, what format to put them in, what columns to add to get the right data. And they have some data conversion services as well to work with it. They've got a pretty healthy number of software packages that they have import guides for. Now, they only have direct import connections with, 5 or 6. Okay. But again, when we're talking about, let's say SAP S4 HANA Cloud, or, we're talking about maybe PeopleSoft, those systems are so big that they're really more of a Lego tool set than they are a database with a defined schema and a defined layout. And so the problem there is that you almost have to do something bespoke with those. So realistically, import is probably the only option there. But again, the idea of being able to of having solutions for importing from this, which is a pretty healthy number of accounting software packages. It's not everything, but it's an awful lot. And they also have workbooks that show the kind of data that they need to go in here.
So the direct connections then, as you mentioned, there's actually, I believe, 8 that they've got running, but we would really think in the US market dominantly around 6 or so platforms allow a direct connect. So you can send an email to your client and they will basically sync based on a date to pull that financial statement in. So the players here include QuickBooks, Microsoft Dynamics, Xero, NetSuite, Sage Intacct, and then the lower end products of Sage Accounting FreshBooks, and they have a Bank Connect module as well. So this whole idea of a read-only connection then gets us to the point that we can do a few supporting work papers. And one of those work papers is proof of cash. So Brian, what about proof of cash automation?
This is the ultimate work paper because it's painful to do it because you're really reconciling every single transaction that flows through and then tying it out. But again, it will automate this whole concept. Again, we used to just do back when dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was doing audits, we used to do just reconciliations for organizations that had decent controls. So we'd look at the reconciliations and audit those. But when we had something where we were concerned, like a nonprofit where we're concerned about completeness of revenues, or something where we get inkling that something may be rotten in the state of Denmark from a fraud perspective, we may decide to jump in and do a proof of cash. I recall one audit partner I worked with wanted to do a proof of cash on a very large municipality I worked on. And so what it really does is it reconciles the cash from the bank to the accounting system. So it will, again, go through, you need bank statement GL detail. It will say what's there, what's not. Again, this is something that is typically done in a forensic audit to try to find things, because again, people steal assets, not liabilities. And so the bank, the money is the easiest thing to fence because you just have to go to the bank. So again, it will show you the differences in these things. And again, potentially identify situations where maybe somebody's not being as forthright as they should be in audits. Randy, talk to us about the journal entry testing here.
Well, on this, many of the tools in the market today are trying to take these extracted or downloaded transactions and plug the holes in the data. And AuditSight's approach is to try to get a complete data set for the general ledger. And that really eliminates a lot of hours where auditors are looking at data that lacks key information, transaction ID, dates, and other items. And so this part of it gives you a fairly straightforward general ledger. Now, one of the other things that AuditSight has done is their management meeting prep. And this was pretty interesting, a relatively new feature on the product platform. Part of the reason, actually, Brian and I wanted to do this podcast for you today, because this was introduced here in mid-2025. And there's several different things that their meeting automation does to eliminate the preparation. So, Brian, what might you call out for our listeners here?
Well, the thing about this is that it's not just that it has to be right. It's that this is expensive time to look at it. Okay. So, if we're looking at a P&L balance sheet analysis, it's not enough that it has to be accurate. It's that the person has to understand, that person has to pull the key insights in there. And that just requires time. Okay. And that's manager partner time, or it's controller CFO time on the other side. So as we start thinking about, this is a tool that really helps leverage the effectiveness of the time that expensive time that you have from those senior execs. So it helps you have a standardized set of things in here, so that the managers, so that the subordinates, the managers, the seniors, the folks on the client side as well that attend the meeting, so they have some idea of what to expect of what's going to come through here. So there's a heat map that analyzes income statement and balance sheet. Drill down so you can get down to the changes in drivers and try to on the fly answer queries and things like that. Some EBITDA modeling to try to, again, get back to cash flow and to look at the quality of those earnings. Ratio analysis for your planning and final review analytics, as well as some standard questions for due diligence as well. So again, they've got a financial anomaly risk score that they've created. That's kind of an interesting ad that they put in there.
Yeah, so AuditSight claims that they save 80% of the meeting prep time, which is good. But bigger picture for me is workflow automation. And the AuditSight tool, like other competitors, let you preserve your existing work paper structures and workflows. And they've set their system up so it can support 3 years, or you can run it on any date range. And for smaller audits, or if you're short on time, doing trial balance only can be done, and then update the GL later. And the chart of accounts remapping and regeneration can be done in this workflow really at any time. So, in terms of a tool to get you more robust, more automated testing, more complete documentation, appropriate reconciliations, and so forth, AuditSight might have the tools that your audit team needs for this. So there's few additional tests available. Brian, what are those?
They have a data book that actually goes through and summarizes the key accounting reports and data so that you can get started. And it basically replaces 17 common schedules that the client usually has to prepare. It also will verify the bank balances from clients' connected accounts so that you don't have to have confirmations. You can actually upload the recons and you can work off of bank statements. You have revenue liquidation that will again do the testing for the transactions and will also reconcile and invoice match things out. And then it will do the subsequent receipt testing of accounts receivable. Now, I'm sure they have other tests that are coming in the near future. You know, again, I think about the the end of year search for unrecorded liabilities. I think about, some of the fixed asset vouching, some of those kinds of things, and I could imagine that those would be future tools in here. But again, this is not a replacement for the audit guidance that you get and your audit methodology that you're getting from, again, a Wolters Kluwer or a Thomson Reuters or somebody else, or a DAS from AICPA. It really is it's really more of a tactical tool. It's a strategic tool for analytics, but then it's also a strategic tool for automation, but it's really solves a lot of tactical problems of how am I going to get this stupid proof of cash done? Because one of the reasons we didn't do them on every engagement is they take a lot of time because there's a lot of transactions to summarize. And the beautiful part now is that you don't have to choose, am I going to do this and not have to do that? If we let the automation do the work, we potentially can do more work with less human involvement in it. Now, the humans are still going to need to review it and check things out in very good detail, but it really gives you the potential to get that more effective audit as opposed to focusing on just doing the same things we did last year more efficiently.
Yeah. So, a few things that AuditSight does on automated testing, as you've heard, proof of cash, journal entry testing, financial statement analysis. They have a universal confirmation module and they have invoice to bank liquidation. So the tool is really designed to work on any client. All that's really needed is their general ledger. Further, you can use Excel work papers to get audit ready outputs for your conclusions, and the product is GAS compliant. So the tool has focus around audit firms, but they also support diligence providers. That's where that management meeting module that we've already talked about in the data book could come into play. And they also have support for private equity providers and venture capitalists to analyze deals a little more rapidly. So there are multiple things that the platform can do well. So Brian, parting thoughts on the AuditSight platform?
I think this is a worthy competitor to some of the others, some of the other more well-established tools in the area, the data snippers, the teammate analytics, and some of those other things. Again, it's, the thing I think about with this is, if I look at the Venn diagram of audit tools that I'm imagining that I'm going to create someday is that, I think about this does some of the substantive testing. It does some of the data extraction, and it does some of the analytics. Okay. Now, what it's not doing is doing the balance calculation and the tracking of the adjusting entries and the preparation of financial statements and those kinds of things. But it is, and it's not a work paper container, okay? But it does create work papers that can go into that work paper container. And it's not it's not a audit methodology on a standalone basis, but it can plug into any audit methodology. So I guess what I would say here is that that's kind of where this fits in the space and kind of how we see it. Randy, and I think, again, automation is where the future is. As much as many things are getting sent offshore, I think realistically, automation is really where it has to go in the long run, because nobody wants to pay more money for their audit. And so if we can get the technology to do it the way it's been done for years in the enterprises, I think we're a whole lot better off.
Understood. And it turns out the two co-founders, TC Whitaker, I met, I think, at the Accelerator program in 2023. The platform's been around for about 4 years. I've known Jonathan Womack about the same time frame, actually. So, the team is entirely built of ex-Big Four auditors that have logged a lot of auditing hours themselves. So we see a lot of promise in new generation AI tools, many of them which are being AI powered, and many of which are eliminating mundane routine work. And this is another tool and platform that supports my premise that more automation and more AI will reduce the amount of outsourcing needed or will automate the outsourced teams far more reliably and quickly. Well, it is always a pleasure, Brian, to cover a product with you in the Accounting Technology Lab. We appreciate all of you as listeners listening in, and we'll see you again in another Accounting Technology Lab.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. We'll be back next Saturday with a new episode of the Technology Lab from CPA Practice Advisor. Have a great week.